Hello everyone, welcome back to Modernly Old Fashioned, a blog where I share our homesteading lifestyle. Right now in Wisconsin it is fall. Well, I guess it's fall all across the country, but it is cold and dreary and rainy and kind of a blah start to fall. And so I've been doing a lot of bread making. One, just because I really like to make bread and we enjoy eating fresh made bread. It's a great comfort food, but two, to also keep our house a little bit warmer. Baking tends to, warm up your house a bit, and I am being stubborn and I do not want to turn on the heat yet. The recipe that I'm using today is the Heirloom Buttermilk bread recipe, and that can be found on my blog, and I will link it in the description below. In the recipe, it actually calls for 3 tablespoons of sugar, but you can really use any type of sweetener that you want. Today, I decided I would make honey buttermilk bread, and it's delicious. But again, if you have special dietary needs or whatnot, just use 3 tablespoons of whatever kind of sweetener you would like to use. There's something about handwritten recipes that I just love, and this one came from my husband's grandma, and even though I have the recipe memorized, I always pull out the card every time I make it. I like to buy my yeast in these larger containers like this. I find it to be a lot more cost effective and really not that difficult to measure out when I need to use yeast. 1 packet equals about 2 1/4 teaspoons of dry yeast. And in order to keep it fresh, I always store my yeast in the freezer. Whether you buy packets or buy it in bulk like this, it's very wise to always store your yeast in the freezer. At this point, I have added my 3 cups of flour, my salt, yeast, and my sweetener, which this time, like I said, was honey. And now it's time to add the liquid, the milk, water, and oil. And you want to have that heated up to between 120, 130 degrees. And if you have it too hot, then it will kill the yeast. If you have it too cold, the yeast might not bloom like it's supposed to. So I had it perfect here, just under 130 degrees. I know it's really, you can't even tell from that, but trust me, it was good. So you go ahead and pour that in, and I find it best just to take a whisk and whisk it all up. Otherwise, whenever I've used a attachment on my mixer, it doesn't ever get the flour from, like the bottom of the bowl. So I go ahead and just use a whisk, get it all, nice and incorporated, and let it sit for just a couple minutes to let the yeast start activating. Next, I add my dough hook attachment and I let it mix on low for about 2 minutes. After the 2 minutes are up, it is time to go ahead and add some more flour. The flour that I use is called Dakota Miller's Choice. I get it in bulk 50-pound bags. It is an unbleached, non-bromated flour, and I find it to be a very good all-purpose flour. I forgot to show you before I started adding more flour, but this is what your mixture should look like after the first 2 minutes. No big lumps or anything like that, just a smooth mix. Now this recipe calls for a total of 6 to 6.5 cups of flour. I've made this recipe so many times that I don't really need to guess. I always put in the full amount of flour and it works perfect for me every time. However, I would definitely make sure, if you're trying this for the first time, start with just the 6 cups and see how it looks, and if you need to add a little bit more, of course it's much easier to add than take away. This batch of dough turned out pretty darn perfect, if I do say so myself. It's pulling away from the sides very nicely. There's no dough stuck on the bottom. It's not dry. This is what you want your dough to look like. If it's still really sticky, then you're going to want to add a little bit more flour to it. If it's really dry, add a little bit of water, just a tiny amount to adjust it to get it to this consistency. When it comes to bread making and frankly a lot of things in my life, I'm lazy and I don't like to knead bread for 10 minutes. So I let my mixer do a lot of the kneading. I'll let it go for quite a while here and then I will pull it out and finish it off hand kneading. But like I said, I try to take the shortcut whenever I can and it still works out really nice. It's now time to go ahead and finish it on the counter or your cutting board. I don't have a huge cutting board, so I go ahead and use my counter. It works just fine. Make sure your surface has a lot of flour so it doesn't get stuck to it if you need to add more. And every once in a while, check the surface to make sure it is nice and smooth and springy. And once it is, then you are done. You'll want to cover it with a clean dish towel for 10 minutes and let it rise. As you can see, it has noticeably risen in that 10 minutes, and now it's time to do the second rise. For that, you want to get your bread pans out. I love using stoneware. I believe these both are Pampered Chef, and you divide your dough in half. I unfortunately didn't have the best angle here to show you how I shape my loaves, but essentially they're just kind of like logs and you tuck the dough in on itself underneath to create the shape, and you just want it to be even throughout so it's not like really big in the middle. It'll cook unevenly if you do that. Here you can get a better idea of what I'm talking about as far as the shape goes. And after you've put them in your pans, you want to cover them up and let them rise again for 35 to 45 minutes, depending on how warm your house is, until they have risen to about this size. You'll want to have your oven preheated to 350 degrees, and once it is preheated, go ahead and put your loaves in for 30 to 35 minutes. You will know that they are ready when you tap on the top and it sounds hollow. Thank you for joining me as I made bread today. If you enjoyed this, I would love it if you gave it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button to see more of our homesteading lifestyle. Thank you for stopping by the Homestead.